So you've met Ron at our introductions, but I'd like to introduce him now as the Executive Director of the NetRF, Net Research Foundation. And many of you know the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation was actually started by a patient and has grown enormously into a huge research foundation for neuroendocrine tumors. We all benefit so much by the work that they do and the research and the grants that they give. So please join me in welcoming Ron Hollander.
So before I go, I don't want to let Giovanna leave. She's been thanking everybody else here. I mentioned to some of you when we were reminiscing about when I was here the first time about 5 years ago, and we had all those people at another hotel. The patient group at LA at that time was going through a bit of transition. Some of you remember that. And somebody stepped up and said, I'm not going to let this be anything but wonderful and great here, and work with Cedars and UCLA and all the providers in this area to bring this LA community together. And that's Giovanna in BC. And she's put together such an incredible program and group here. And I just want to applaud Giovanna. Thank you. She's an inspiration. And I also, is Laren in the back there? No, she's still working the table. The other half of my team, the better half, is Laren Heider, who's been doing so much on all of our education programs, both here today and throughout the year. So hopefully she'll come in the room. I'll thank her again later. So I'm going to talk a little bit about research. I am so pleased to see so many of you still here in the room, especially those 50 or 60% of you said it's the first time. I'm sure your head was spinning after many of those earlier presentations, trying to get through all of the therapeutics, the drugs, the different decisions that have to be made. And I think we've spent the afternoon trying to bring a lot of that together. And I hope you can hang in there because there's still a lot of wonderful stuff to come here. As Giovanna said, we started about 10 years ago. It was called the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. It was started by a patient whose journey was very similar to, I'm sure, a lot of yours. She was a 29-year-old lawyer in Boston. She had been complaining for some time about of some of the symptoms that could easily be diagnosed as irritable bowel syndrome or whatever. Some of her doctors said she was just stressed out from her job, until one day she just collapsed on the subway, the T we call it in Boston. They rushed her to one of the significant teaching hospitals in Boston. They saw tumors on her liver, thought she had liver cancer, and she was going to die in 6 months. Well, those turned out to be liver mets from a carcinoid tumor in her gastrointestinal tract. She is still alive today, despite the fact that her cancer had been very progressive at that point in time. And she said, when she looked around, where are the experts? Even a place that she could go to for her earliest diagnosis didn't know much about carcinoid or neuroendocrine. Where is the research? And that was really appalling to her to find that there was so little that was being done to help in the diagnosis and especially the treatment, but particularly the cure of neuroendocrine tumors. And so that's how Caring for Carcinoid was born. She put a few folks together and said, that's what we're going to do. It's a 501c3 nonprofit foundation whose core mission is to find cures, to fund the research, to find cures and better treatments for all forms of neuroendocrine tumors. I've been pleased and privileged, quite frankly, to be the executive director for almost 5 years now. And many of you are wonderful friends and supporters, so thank you for that, because all of what we do is not possible without the generosity of mostly our patients and our families and some wonderful foundations I'll name a little bit later. So let me talk a little bit about the work we're doing. It's the big button, they tell me. And there is water here. So we've been around for about 10 years now. Over those first 10 years, we're able to raise and spend about $12 million directly to fund research, again, with that sole objective of finding better treatments and cures for all forms of neuroendocrine cancer. For those of you who have been following our newsletters, the end of 2015 was just an incredible time for us when just shortly after Thanksgiving, and then before Christmas Eve, and finally on New Year's Eve, we were awarded a $15 million commitment from the Margie and Robert E. Peterson Foundation to continue our work. For those of you who don't know the Peterson Foundation, the Automotive Museum here in LA is a function of the Peterson legacy in automobile publications. So if you haven't been to that fabulous museum, which has been renovated recently, please go. It's amazing. I was there yesterday for the first time myself. There's a history, obviously, of and a connection to neuroendocrine cancer in that family. And we were very privileged, and several of you in this room were very instrumental in helping us to work with the trustees of that foundation to talk about what we could do to honor that legacy by really increasing the intensity and hopefully the progress of our research in terms of finding cures for neuroendocrine cancer. So this is a huge moment for us, and I hope you will see for all of you, because we're going to be able to do things we've never been able to do before, and our challenge is to get them done, get the kind of results we need, and to sustain that level of effort until we find a cure, until we meet our goal. So far we already have been funding research at 7 of the top 10, according to U.S. News and World Report's cancer centers in the U.S. and some abroad, and you will see in a moment how we're looking to increase our footprint, but also our progress by working with investigators all over the world. Our board of directors are all either patients or family members of patients. They have the same sense of urgency that I'm sure many of you do to find a cure, to make sure that whatever we're doing as a solid science base is peer-reviewed by an outstanding board of scientific advisors. I mean, these people who give us the kind of volunteer time that you couldn't pay enough money for, experts in their own fields, in their own rights, to make sure that everything we do, every dollar we spend, is spent wisely in terms of really the best possible research that can advance our cause. So they provide oversight. We are, of course, committed to providing the kind of support to patients and families through these kinds of education programs, as well as our website, which I hope you'll visit. We've launched, in the last couple of years, a major immunotherapy initiative. I know there were some questions earlier. I'm going to touch on that briefly, and then Pam Kutz will talk a little bit more about what we're doing in that area as well. So our research strategy is really founded on what I would call building a community of really committed and top-notch experts, researchers, clinicians working together to really drive that progress. Dr. Herman had mentioned several times during his talk that there was something very special about this community. I know you feel it as a patient community, but I feel it having come from the broader medical field, working with hospitals for many years. There's a level of collaboration and respect and commitment that comes from a relatively rare disease space, working together, sharing data even before it's published to make progress. It's really unusual. And when you see, as you've seen and will continue to see here today, doctors kind of respectfully working with each other, sharing what's best in terms of the sequence of treatments, the choice of treatments, but also in terms of the research, it's quite extraordinary. And we occupy a very special niche there in terms of research. And what we're trying to build is an army of researchers who are not only doing great research in their own right, but who are collaborating, connecting, replenishing, and building the supply of researchers by bringing in brilliant young investigators, finding experts in other fields. When we started immunotherapy, there wasn't anything hardly being done in cancer treatment around that, no less in neuroendocrine. So as you'll see, we brought some of the best experts to our cause. That's what we want to do, is attract the very best thinking to make sure we can make the most progress here. And there's three parts to what we try to do. One is discovery, that is trying to find out, I mentioned earlier, what is it that makes these cancers form in the first place? What makes them grow? Why do some grow fast? Why do some grow slower? How can we unlock the basic biology that'll allow us to interrupt it and hopefully reverse it so we can actually eliminate these tumors in the future? And by the way, when Dr. Liu talked about, the best thing is to throw that tumor in the trash can, don't let them throw the tumor in the trash can. We need to keep those tumors, make sure those are preserved, either at your hospital, if it's a community hospital, or at a center like Stanford or Cedars or UCLA, because that's a really important part of the research continuum. But also developing models so that we can safely test new treatments, whether it's on laboratory animals or in petri dishes, as it were. That's been a real challenge in neuroendocrine cancers because most of our tumors grow so slowly. They're very hard to grow in the lab, and that's where most of the successful trials of new drugs start for many cancers. It's a real handicap for us. We're doing some innovative things to try to overcome that. And then finally, and probably most importantly to all of you, getting to those preclinical trials, but especially clinical trials that can finally show that, as you heard today, whether it was with PRRT or some of the other treatments, the efficacy, the safety that can really improve your care. So that whole continuum with a growing army, if you will, of people really dedicated to the cause. In terms of those applied projects, that is, the ones that are really closest to the clinical continuum, we launched a major immunotherapy initiative just a couple of years ago with a major challenge grant from the TripAdvisor Charitable Foundation. There are 5 projects there. I'll talk a little bit about them in a moment, but then let Pam really pick it up from there. 2 major projects at the University of Pennsylvania, one here at Stanford, up just a bit north of here, and then 3 that are really in different institutions designed to really take a look at our tumors. As you'll hear about immunotherapy, the tough thing with getting immunotherapy to work, which has been kind of a holy grail for cancer for 100 years, people have been trying to find a way, get our systems, our bodies, to really recognize cancer as it would a virus or a strange bacteria and fight it. Why doesn't it do that for our tumors? So we're really examining on a very micro level, what is it about our tumors that allows them to evade, avoid, or defend against the immune system, and then to attack it with some of these drugs and other innovative ways of attacking it. So those all go together. I'll come back to that in a moment. There are a couple of other things that, again, Dr. Herman has mentioned a couple of times here. We're doing a clinical trial, a very small clinical trial on PRRT at Memorial Sloan Kettering. This is using the type of approach that Dr. Herman said. You may recall he was talking about attaching this radiation to the somatostatin receptors with an agonist, something that looks like somatostatin. But he said it might be even safer and more effective if this antagonist, something that's kind of the opposite of somatostatin, was used for a variety of reasons. That's exactly what we're testing at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Very small clinical trial. That's about all we can do to really start these things, in the hope that if we can demonstrate efficacy, there'll be an investment from a pharmaceutical company or others to broaden the trial and broaden the application. So that trial is underway. I believe it's very close to already being enrolled with the first 20 patients. That was all we and one other foundation were able to fund. We're hoping that there will be an expansion of that trial. You will hear from us. Please check in, sign up for our mailing list, and we will let you know if that happens as well. But we're very excited now that there's finally momentum on PRRT, that we may actually be able to have something very close by, past this FDA approval, that also shows something that's even safer and more effective. Maybe we'll teach our European neighbors a little bit of something about an even better way of doing PRRT. It would be great. Also, some personalized medicine work going on at Sloan Kettering, where they've discovered, for those of you who have the pancreatic tumors, or what we call PNETs, pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors, where she's found, especially after treatment, that there are some changes to the tumors that might help actually predict what's going to happen next, which ones are going to be faster growing, which ones are going to be slower growing. Very important information to inform all of what you heard from the panel, decision-making about what to do next. And then a couple of other programs at the University of California, at the University of Wisconsin. We really, if you look, and it's at our table out there, have a broad array of everything from basic science to clinical work going on at centers all over the country. So the momentum is building. As I mentioned, the PRRT is our first clinical trial at Sloan Kettering. You're going to hear in a moment about the first immunotherapy clinical trial in neuroendocrine at Stanford, which we hope will be starting very, very soon. We have a UPenn team. I know about half of you raised your hands, or more than that you're new here today. please go to our website and take a look at, or just Google Carl June Fighting Fire with Fire. Carl June is the expert in immunotherapy who had this amazing breakthrough just 2 years ago treating leukemias with unbelievable results for patients who would really run out of choices. It's a very moving video. When one of our board members saw it, he said, "Why can't we do this for neuroendocrine?" And we reached out to Carl June at the University of Pennsylvania. It's just so happened we have two other important components there. One, Dr. Metz, who some of you may have heard of. He was here last year. A terrific clinical leader, a gastroenterologist in terms of neuroendocrine, but also a terrific researcher in Xin Hua. That's like a dream team of people putting together something that's working for another cancer, combining it with the clinical and basic science knowledge that we can develop in terms of neuroendocrine, and seeing if we can make that work for our patients. So if we're successful there, hopefully we'll go to those preclinical trials and then clinical trials as well. I talked about the new class of mutations at Sloan Kettering. There's some really exciting new foundation and other partnerships, obviously with the Margie and Robert E. Peterson Foundation, but others. I just came back from a trip to Europe where we're working with a family foundation. I don't know if any of you in this audience have pheochromocytomas or paragangliomas, rare forms of neuroendocrine tumors. They want to work with us. They've been doing their own research. They want to say, look, what can we learn from each other to make this progress go faster? We have offered international prizes for some of those most vexing of problems, cell lines and animal models that we can use to test. It looks like we may have our first winners of those prizes. That would be a huge breakthrough to the research community where we could really begin to test in a safe way new drugs, new therapies, combination therapies safely in the lab preclinically before we try them on patients. And then annually, we offer grants to the entire cancer research universe, if you will, through the American Association for Cancer Research. So we send an RFP out to their 37,000 members. It's a huge organization of cancer researchers internationally looking for the best ideas, because we don't have all of the best ideas around our table, to make sure we're challenging our thinking, always bringing in new perspectives, and we do that every year as well. So this is a little bit of an example, just quickly, about some of the new things that we and I've been doing in particular over these last few months, especially with the new funding from the Peterson Foundation. We went to ENETS, which was the European Neuroendocrine Tumor Society meetings. Huge meeting. Not only have they had PRRT available for a long time, but they've been working on guidelines and sequencing and a lot of the things we've been talking about here, in some cases for many decades, not just for many years. We're catching up, but they have a lot of things that are going on there and a lot of research going on. We wanted to attract some of those best minds and thinking to our work as well. So we're doing outreach there. We've gathered some of those researchers with our domestic researchers here. We're going to be doing some major RFPs, requests for proposals, to see where we can fund the very best things that can produce the greatest progress very shortly. I'll talk about the timetable there. I went to Sweden to visit with that family. At the same time, took a little trip to Germany to visit with a lab that's doing something around cancer vaccines specific to neuroendocrine. I'll come back to that in a moment. Very exciting. Dr. Woolen talked about the article that we did. I'm the president of the International Neuroendocrine Cancer Alliance, 18 countries from around the world dedicated to increasing awareness, but also dedicated to making sure that highest standards of care and the best research is available to all patients wherever they reside. And we're doing another article very shortly on the US-based portion of that survey as well. We're hoping to do a project with the European and North American tumor societies to really advance knowledge and make it available to our patients about clinical trials that are available or basic information you should know about research. The North American Neuroendocrine Tumor Society and we have just reached agreement on a collaboration to fund a new basic and translational science investigator, a joint effort to continue to try to bring new and mid-career investigators to our cause and make sure they make this the centerpiece of their career. Very exciting. Lauren Erb, our former director of research, as she decided to retire to spend more time with her family, still involved, and you'll hear more about that. We named a lecture after her, and Hans Clevers from the Netherlands has been our first recipient. He's got this amazing thing in terms of models called organoids, and some of you were present when he presented this. Three-dimensional models of your body cells to grow not real organs, but organ-like structures that we could also perhaps use to develop and test new treatments. So very exciting new things we're going to try to bring to that core mission of cure. And then finally, we're looking to doing this similar thing that with NANETS with the Educational Research Foundation, a nonprofit affiliated with the Nuclear Medicine Society here in the United States, to, given all of what's happening with nuclear medicine, bring another young investigator into the fold to look at how we can use those techniques for better imaging, treatment, and hopefully cure of neuroendocrine tumors. So hopefully that will happen very soon. Okay, so just wrapping up quickly, and we'll turn it to Pam. We are wrapping up to accelerate progress very dramatically this summer, hopefully in August. There'll be a major RFP going out. These will be the largest grants we've ever offered, so we're trying to bring all of the best researchers and get the attention of the labs here and around the world to really help us focus on developing dedicated teams to really cracking the code of our tumors and helping us really figure out what it is that's going to be the breakthroughs for better treatments and cures. Some of that's going to bring new targeted therapies like immunotherapy or others. People are talking about proteomics and other things that I'm not that familiar with, but if they're breakthrough possibilities that other cancers are exploring, we want to see what people would propose to do to apply them to NETs. Also making sure that whatever we fund, we bring those researchers together to share information even before it's published, something that's unheard of in many academic fields. You know, people want to publish, they want to share their data, they worry that others are going to steal it and it's not going to advance their careers. We require all of our researchers to be committed to sharing their data, making regular progress reports, and especially with these big grants, to make sure that everything that's learned over here can be shared over here so that we know that we're getting the fastest progress possible and continuing to attract more and more people to our cause. We're excited as a board and as a staff and as a scientific advisory committee about this new level of effort. But I can tell you, and one of my board members is right here, Todd Gilman, we're very concerned about making sure we can sustain that effort. So one of my jobs is to continue to make sure that we develop the fundraising base, the affiliations, the collaborations with major foundations, so that we can keep at this new level of investment and cure until we reach our goal. I'd like to tell you we're going to get there in 3 years. It's probably going to take longer than that. We're here for the long term, and hopefully with your support, we'll be able to get that goal. So quickly on immunotherapy as a lead into Dr. Kuntz's remarks. This was the cover of Science magazine at the end of 2013, I guess it was now. And this was all abuzz at all of the major cancer meetings nationally and internationally. There are 5 projects, as I mentioned earlier. Pam's going to talk about one of them, a clinical trial at Stanford, and she'll explain what's behind that. I mentioned the Carl June thing. It's called Fighting with Fire. If you want to see the video, it's pretty easy to find. And you'll see why we were so motivated to put a team together there to try to see if we could bring the same techniques to neuroendocrine tumors. And basically, and I'll leave this with you and Pam, there are 3 different approaches, if you will. Maybe there's a 4th if we included some of the things that Pam's going to talk about, in terms of what immunotherapy does to really help your immune system sort of fight your cancer cells. One is the direct killing of cancer cells by mechanisms that Pam will talk a lot more about in terms of what is it about the immune system that keeps it from doing that job and what drugs can be used to hopefully help it do that job. On the right-hand side is what Carl June and the team at UPenn are doing, which is trying to develop what's called CAR T cells by basically harvesting T cells from your own body, your immune cells, modifying them in a way to be attracted to your tumors and then fortifying them in a certain way where they become serial killer cells, if you will, specifically designed with cells from your own body to attack those tumors. So we've got those two things going. In Germany, I'd heard a presentation at the American Association for Cancer Research here in New Orleans, and so I made a side trip to Germany to visit a lab that's working on vaccines. So they've taken a tumor, a neuroendocrine tumor now, and they've done some very detailed profiling to find what they believe are reasonable targets for particular therapies that are available. They then did the same kind of profile with dozens of other neuroendocrine tumors, and we haven't seen the data yet, and they have a lot more to work on, but they're starting to believe that they see patterns in these tumors that might make whatever vaccine comes out of this something that could be effective for maybe a whole variety of neuroendocrine tumors. Very exciting work. We're reaching out to them. We're reaching out to other labs around the world that are doing that kind of work to say, come in, make a proposal in August, and we'll be funding some of these really exciting projects going forward from there. So stay tuned. Quickly, just to say a thank you to, I know we have a bunch of donors here in this room, so a very special thank you to you. All of this work is made possible by our donors, and a lot of it is very small donations from families and friends, and some of it comes from some very special foundations. I mentioned a few. Oops, I should go back, right? There it is. Wow. I mentioned a few of these here. The Goldhirsch Yellen Foundation here in Los Angeles 2 years ago gave us $1 million challenge grant. They continue to be very supportive. The Margie and Robert E. Peterson Foundation, please go visit that museum. It's amazing. And they're helping you and they're helping us in a big, big way. Obviously, Terry and Todd Gilman's Family Foundation. Thank you, Todd, a member of our board. Yes, thank you, Todd. And TripAdvisor and many others. It's really a family affair in so many ways. And of course, we partner with a lot of organizations going forward as well. So thank you to them. We also get some sponsorship, as we did here in LA, from Lexicon, as well as Novartis, Ipsen, and the Net Alliance to put on these kinds of programs all year round. So we want to say a very special thank you to them as well.